Major breaking news. Donald Trump has done it again, this time helping to save the American gun industry and our Second Amendment rights from nonsensical regulations designed by the Biden administration to destroy both. Fantastic news. Another win for the Second Amendment, another win for our right to keep and bear arms, and yes, indeed, another win for the American gun industry and our economy and all of us American workers. Let's break it down when we come right back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Nine, a proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thank you, 2025 Gundies Awards. All right, fantastic news and further evidence that Donald Trump continues to advance our right to keep and bear arms. Specifically, he has just thrown in the trash bin of history a Joe Biden attempt to destroy the American gun industry by shutting down the ability of American gun companies, for all intents and purposes, to be able to export their weapons, their civilian arms and ammunition and the like, to overseas markets. This was designed by President Biden to destroy the American gun industry by depriving them of literally tens and tens of millions of dollars in revenues, and by helping to expand, or this is what he was trying to stop, Joe Biden was trying to stop this, by expanding the right to keep and bear arms across the world, as well as ensuring that those individuals working in the American gun industry, both in big businesses and small businesses, all worked hard and all had the opportunity to benefit economically from the ability to sell civilian firearms all across this globe. Well, needless to say, Joe Biden got in there and in 2024 tried to shut all of this down, tried to destroy the American gun industry, specifically the small gun companies that were simply not able to make firearms and export them in any kind of profitable way because Joe Biden was trying to drive them out of business by making it very difficult to export firearms overseas, by, among other things, making it difficult to get a license to export firearms and making them repeatedly apply over and over and over and over again to get an export license, and on an annual basis, believe it or not. Well, Donald Trump has stepped in and made it a win-win-win for not only the American gun industry, but our Second Amendment rights, but also to shut down the deep state bureaucracy that was trying to destroy all of the above. Specifically, this is a win for the Trump administration, and it reiterates my point on this channel that a lot of those people in the Second Amendment community, and you know exactly who you are, you anti-Trumpers in the Second Amendment community, whining and complaining about nonsensical things, about Amy Coney Barrett on one day, Pam Bondi on another day, Donald Trump on another day, and you know exactly who you are back in early 2025, where prior to Donald Trump having his entire Second Amendment team in, this was before Pam Bondi had been confirmed as the Attorney General, this is before John Sauer had been confirmed as the Solicitor General, this is before Harmeet Dillon had been confirmed as the head of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, among other things. Like a week or two after Donald Trump got into office, the Department of Commerce that oversees the export licenses, which one needs to get before you can sell guns overseas, the Department of Commerce put a pause on all these regulations and all these licenses because while Joe Biden had done everything in its power to shut down the ability of American gun companies to sell guns overseas in a profitable way, everyone understood that Donald Trump was going to step in and fix this. But of course, between the time Donald Trump came into office and the time that he got a Second Amendment team into place, and the time they were able to craft and draft what they needed to do to revoke and eliminate these ridiculous Joe Biden interim rules, a lot of people in the conservative movement, anti-Trumpers most of whom, complained and whined about Donald Trump not doing enough to help in this regard. But again, one thing we've learned in the past is this. If you're going to change regulations, if you're going to change the law, if you're going to issue rules from the Department of Commerce, from the Department of Justice, from the federal government, you have to do it right. You have to dot your I's. You got to cross your T's. You got to go through all the proper processes. Because if you don't do any of the above, if you screw up on any of the above, then some court is going to step up and say that you did it wrong. You may recall from Donald Trump's first term when he tried to add to the 2020 census a question about whether or not one was an illegal alien or not. Because that process was not done according to Hoyle, Chief Justice John Roberts of the Supreme Court said that Donald Trump could not ask that question because the process of amending the census forms to add the question was not done correctly under federal procedural law. And therefore, it could not be asked. So Donald Trump was not able to ask that question, and that had a whole other ripple effect that we could talk about in a separate video that I do think hurt the Trump administration and President Trump's re-election chances in 2020. So the reason why I bring this up, folks, is there are people in the conservative community and the never-Trumper community and the Second Amendment community that don't like Donald Trump, they don't like Pam Bondi, they don't like Amy Coney Barrett, and so on. And they like to click, get their clicks. You know, they like to say things to get a bunch of clicks on social media. I don't blame them. I understand that. You want to get your views, you want to get your clicks, you want to get your views, whatever it is. Like, you know. But with that said, a lot of people said that this issue with Donald Trump and how he had not rapidly gone out there and unwound all this Trump-Biden administration nonsense involving these regulations promulgated by the Department of Commerce, specifically promulgated by the Department of Commerce and a particular bureau called the Bureau of Industry and Security, which is responsible for giving licenses to companies who can in turn export firearms or other technology overseas. So there's all these complaints about Trump not moving fast enough, but again, he had to take his time and get this right. In fact, if you look at the document, which I'll try to put a link to in this video below, or the video in the description of this video, guess what? The document that was prepared by the Department of Commerce to unwind all that Joe Biden nonsense is something like 120 plus pages. It's like 120 pages and then some of detailed analysis, addressing all these comments and responding to all these questions and doing all this thing you have to do, all these things you have to do under what's known as notice and rulemaking and all these processes. And the Trump administration had to do this, and someone had to sit down and type all this stuff up and edit all this stuff and get it squared away and double check it and triple check it and make sure they got it all right. Because all the things that the Trump administration does, including promulgating presumably this 120 pages of regulations and analysis, removing from the Federal Register, if you will, the Joe Biden regulations, you know and I know this is all going to get sued over by some anti-gun group or somebody complaining about something who hates Trump. And therefore, the Trump administration and their lawyers have to make sure everything they do is according to Hoyle, is perfect, doesn't make any mistakes, because they know it could potentially be challenged by someone in court. And as a result of that, that takes the Trump administration and their lawyers and advisors and their employees longer to get all this stuff done, because they have to get it right the first time so it can survive a potential court challenge. Now, with that said, this particular regulation that Donald Trump just basically unwound from Joe Biden is a huge win, not only for the Second Amendment community, it's a huge win for the gun industry, and they're intertwined. Because most people in the United States who want to exercise their right to keep and bear arms need to buy firearms from gun companies, from gun makers, gun businesses. And we need to make sure these gun companies stay in business. Because if you destroy the gun industry, well, guess what? We can't get guns. It's just the way it is. Or if you make it harder for the gun industry to make money by, for example, preventing them from increasing their revenues and their income by selling overseas, they're going to have to potentially drive up prices on the American consumer, make it more expensive for we Americans to be able to buy firearms and ammunition and other accessories to exercise our right to keep and bear arms here in America. And of course, as you know, and as I explained before, one of the major things that Donald Trump is doing and his administration is doing is trying to help the American economy, help the American worker, the manufacturing employee, the businesses, the small businesses that are FFLs. All of these things, in addition to advancing the right to keep and bear arms, we want American businesses to succeed. We want people to get wealthy, owning companies and growing companies. We want people to make money working for these companies so they can feed their families and provide for the homes and buy Christmas presents and take care of their family in retirement and so on. All this requires, making money, having sales, revenues, profits, and so on. And the Joe Biden administration hates the gun industry, hates the Second Amendment, wants to do the exact opposite of what's best for the American worker, American companies, American capitalism, and the gun industry and the Second Amendment. And that is why it was Joe Biden that promulgated this regulation that did things like says that if you want to export firearms, you have to apply instead of every 4 or 5 years for your license, you have to renew your license every single year. You have to comply with federal law every single year with your license application. And therefore, rather than spending time on making better guns, selling those guns, marketing your product, whatever it is that's productive, instead you have to spend a bunch of time and money on lawyers and other people to get your license renewed every single year, under the Biden regulations at least, to be able to export firearms and other weapons and other items overseas. That was the big thing Joe Biden did. He moved it from like 4 or 5 years to get your license renewed to every single year. There's no reason for that. He claimed it was for national security, but the Trump administration just said that was nonsense. But again, this is the typical Joe Biden. So with that said, here's exactly what the Trump administration had to say about this new regulation, basically getting rid of it in a sense. It's like a new regulation that's getting rid of an old regulation, which they have to do. Here's what the Trump administration had to say about this big win for the Second Amendment. Department of Commerce rescinds Biden-era firearms rule, restoring common sense to export controls on civilian firearms. Today, the Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security rescinded an interim final rule issued by the Biden administration, which imposed onerous export controls on civilian firearms and related ammunition and components. The rescission of the firearms IFR, which is the interim final rule, will allow U.S. firearms manufacturers to compete in overseas markets, creating hundreds of millions of dollars per year in export opportunities. Moreover, today's rule revokes these requirements and restores, that's the revoking of the Biden requirements, of course, and restores the export rules for civilian firearms that existed under the first Trump administration. Under these rules, exports of most pistols, rifles, and non-long barrel shotguns will remain subject to a worldwide export license requirement. Long barrel shotguns and most optics can be exported without a license to U.S. allies and certain partners. License application paperwork requirements for firearms will be streamlined and consistent with normal Bureau of Industry and Security practices. The BIS and the interagency partners will continue to screen firearms license applications to reduce the risk of weapons ending up in the hands of course, wrongdoers. So that's great news. Now, I just want to say one thing, just because to make you the smartest person in the room, I want you to understand this distinction. When it comes to exporting firearms, I know this is going to get a little geeky, and I don't want to get too detailed because you don't need to know the details. You just need to know one thing, and that's this. For those companies that want to export firearms, there are really two separate agencies that can play a role. If you're trying to export military-grade weaponry, tanks, planes, automatic machine guns, things like that, obviously really military defense-oriented weapons, like selling an F-16 or something, you have to comply with what's known as ITAR, which is the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, and ITAR is overseen by the United States Department of State, in this case today, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. So we're not talking about ITAR regulations with what Donald Trump just did. He is talking about the exportation of civilian firearms to gun clubs overseas, to hunters and shooters in Europe. You see what I'm saying? To shotguns that can be used to engage in skeet shooting or duck hunting, whatever it is. Or big game hunting in Africa, for example, with big rifles, let's say. This is not covered by the Department of State and the ITAR regulations. This is instead covered by the United States Department of Commerce, right? Not the Secretary of State's office, but the Department of Commerce. And specifically under the Bureau of Industry and Security is kind of the bureau within the Department of Commerce. And the specific regulations, or laws, I should say, that this falls under when you're exporting civilian-oriented weaponry, or things that might have what would be called a dual purpose. Something could be used militarily and or civilian-wise. Let's say a 9mm semi-automatic pistol could be used in the military or could be used by civilians and something like that. So again, if you're selling something that has a dual purpose that can be used militarily or otherwise, or just something can be used in the civilian market, that is governed by what's known as the Export Administration Regulation, which falls under the Department of Commerce for the purposes of ensuring compliance. And that is what Joe Biden was trying to destroy. He wasn't trying to, frankly, prevent Iran from getting weapons from Americans. Instead, he was really just trying to prevent ordinary Europeans from being able to get arms from American gun companies and making it harder for the American gun industry to sell and to make money and for the Europeans to get these things. So this had nothing to do with national security and everything to do with just trying to destroy an industry, which is the gun industry, and our Second Amendment rights by the Biden administration, but they obviously failed. And again, just to wrap up, this is another reminder of how when I defend the Trump administration, I tell you people like Pam Bondi need a little bit of time on certain things. It's not to say that they're doing everything perfectly, but overall they're doing a good job. And I've got my criticisms, and I've expressed my criticisms about some of the things that have occurred. But overall, we must admit that the trend is our friend. And I just want to remind everyone that you're over there on X, you're over there on YouTube, you see what I'm saying? You're over there on Rumble. And some people have a tendency to be double downers or Debbie Downers when it comes to the Trump administration. And maybe they truly believe it. That's certainly possible. Maybe they're just naturally hyperbolic and prone to exaggeration. Maybe they don't like Trump and Bondi for whatever things has happened in the past. Who knows? But I just want to remind you all that, objectively speaking, we are so much better off today than we were under Biden. And I think the trend remains our friend, and a lot of good stuff that's going to come out. And again, remember, some of the stuff just takes time to get it done right. Because if the Trump administration promulgates these kinds of regulations, like this 120 some odd page document, and they don't get it done right, they have typos or mistakes or issues, it can come back and blow up in their face in court. And that's why I think there is an effort to get all the stuff correctly done ahead of time so that it will be done correctly. Everyone can rely on it and can move forward. And if it's challenged in court, the Trump administration will prevail. And as you know, as of now, I think the Trump administration is something along the lines of 20-0 in 2025 before the U.S. Supreme Court in the so-called emergency docket, where the lower courts totally misbehave, don't follow the law, and the Supreme Court has to spank them. And the Trump record so far this year is something like 20-0. It's a very good record for sports teams, and certainly a fantastic record for the Trump legal Department of Justice and the Solicitor General's office. All right, folks, so there you have it. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you follow me on X at @PerBoxOfDiner. Don't forget to subscribe both to YouTube and to Rumble. And I look forward to talking to you all again real soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.